You think anger ruins your day, but you're wrong. That feeling only lasts 90 seconds. The rest? That's your choice. You're not a pinball. You're the player. Ready to find your emotional superpower? You know that feeling. It hits you like a tidal wave. A comment, a moment of impatience, or just a bad email that instantly curdles your entire day. We've all been there, standing in the emotional rubble of something someone else said or did, convinced that our mood is utterly ruined. We believe we're victims of circumstance, helpless passengers on the emotional roller coaster designed by others. But what if I told you that feeling? That pure, unadulterated spike of anger, frustration, or stress only lasts 90 seconds? And what if I told you that the subsequent hours of simmering resentment, the mental replays, and the internal arguments are entirely optional? Here is the revolutionary truth backed by neuroscience. Anger, in its raw, physiological form, is a choice. It's an automatic, unconscious physical reaction, yes, but its lifespan is incredibly short. Think about it like this. When you perceive a threat, whether it's a physical danger or a rude driver cutting you off, your ancient brain hits the panic button. This immediately floods your system with stress hormones, chiefly cortisol and adrenaline. This chemical cascade is what gives you that immediate, visceral sensation of being ticked off. Your heart rate speeds up, your fists clench, and your mental focus narrows. That chemical storm is real. That chemical storm, however, naturally flushes from your system in exactly 90 seconds. Stop and let that sink in. 90 seconds. That's shorter than most songs on the radio. It's the time it takes to brush your teeth. It's the lifespan of a pure, unadulterated emotional reaction. So if the chemicals responsible for anger are gone after a minute and a half, how on earth do we manage to stay furious for hours, sometimes days, over something as trivial as someone misspelling our name in a meeting? We keep the anger alive. We act as the emotional arsonist, constantly feeding the fire with the only fuel that keeps it burning, the story. The incident happens. The 90 seconds of biological stress are over. But instead of letting the system naturally reset, we jump into the mental rehearsal room. We replay the tape. They can't treat me like that. Who do they think they are? I should have said X. Wait until I see them tomorrow. I'll tell them why. We're not reacting to the original event anymore. We're reacting to the story we are telling ourselves about the event. Every time you replay the injustice, you trigger a fresh 90-second dose of stress chemicals. You are voluntarily redosing yourself with anger. It's the emotional equivalent of having a smoke alarm go off when you burn the toast. The smart thing to do is open a window, fan the smoke out, and let the system reset. But what we usually do is leave the burnt toast on the counter, then start making more burnt toast right next to the alarm. Imagine you're stuck in traffic and someone swerves dangerously in front of you. Your body instantly reacts. That's the 90 seconds. But then the conscious mind kicks in, and you start the narrative, what an idiot. They must think they own the road. People like that ruin society. And suddenly, 20 minutes later, when you've reached your destination, you're still carrying that heat, that frustration, that clenched jaw. You're not mad about the car anymore. You're mad about the drama you created in your own head. When you internalize this 90-second rule, you realize that you possess a hidden power, a choice point. The initial reaction is automatic, but your subsequent emotional state is entirely within your control. You can let the chemicals flush naturally. Just wait it out, breathe, and let the wave pass. Or you can actively choose to feed the fire, to become a victim of your own narrative and stay angry. This simple rule is the secret weapon of those few people who seem to remain unflappable no matter what happens around them. They're not superheroes, and they don't have special genes. They simply understand that they are not required to participate in the drama their mind tries to create after the initial 90-second reset period. They know that the only one who truly suffers from replaying the story is the storyteller. The journey to emotional mastery begins with this single, powerful recognition. After 90 seconds, your feelings stop being a biological necessity and start becoming an emotional decision. If the 90-second rule is about mastering the body's initial reaction, this second secret is about mastering the mind's narrative. This is where we confront the biggest emotional myth we cling to, the button pusher myth. Think about the last time someone really set you off. Maybe a coworker made a sarcastic jab, or your partner forgot to do something you asked. What did you say? Odds are it was something like, ugh, they just know how to push my buttons, or I swear they do it just to make me angry. We utter this phrase. They push my buttons. Like we are helpless, remote-controlled devices, we give other people magical powers over our internal emotional state. We believe they hold the universal remote, and all they have to do is hit the rage button and poof. We explode. But here is the game-changing revelation. Nobody can push a button you haven't given them. If your emotional state can be instantly hijacked by a specific person or a specific phrase, it's not because they have superpowers. It's because the button they are pushing isn't actually connected to them. It's connected to something much deeper inside you. The button pusher myth assumes that other people are the problem, but the truth is that those buttons are merely unhealed wounds or values violations from your past. They are emotional landmines left over from previous relationships or experiences that never fully resolved. Let's create a trigger map. When your coworker criticizes your work and you instantly feel defensive and furious far beyond what the criticism warrants, you need to pause and ask, what is this really about? The immediate surface level answer is, it's about my annoying coworker. But when you dig deeper, you might realize, that tone reminds me exactly of my critical parent who was never satisfied with anything I did. Suddenly, the coworker isn't pushing your buttons, they are just revealing them. They are showing you, with surgical precision, exactly where you still need healing. They are pointing to an old wound that is still tender. Understanding this shifts everything. When your partner is late, and you become instantly disproportionately angry, is it about lateness, or does it trigger a childhood fear of abandonment or a feeling of unimportance? When your boss micromanages you and you fly into a rage, is it about the task, or does it trigger a feeling of mistrust or being controlled that echoes a previous toxic relationship? The difficult people in your life are not your persecutors. They are actually your emotional trainers. They are providing you with opportunities to locate and heal these old wounds. Every time you get triggered, they are handing you a map to your own internal landscape. When you stop believing you are a helpless remote control, you transform into the operator of your own emotional state. Here's the practical technique. The next time you feel a disproportionate reaction, that rush of heat and defensiveness, don't react outwardly. Instead, activate your observer self more on that later, and mentally note the trigger. Then, ask the critical question, what old story or wound is this current situation echoing? By asking this, you instantly redirect your attention from blaming the external person to examining your internal vulnerability. This is where your power lies. When you realize the intense anger you feel toward a dismissive friend is actually a flash of old shame from a school bully, you can address the shame, not the friend. The moment you find the source, the unhealed wound, the external trigger loses most of its power. The button is effectively disconnected. Nobody gets to decide how you feel except you. The anger, defensiveness, or outrage that your biggest trigger person sparks in you has less to do with their actions today and everything to do with the unresolved feelings you carried into the relationship. Map your emotional landmines. Know your triggers. This knowledge transforms you from a victim reacting to external stimuli into a powerful student healing internal wounds. You are no longer navigating a minefield blindfolded. You are using the map to step around the danger, proactively transforming old pain into present peace. So you've pinpointed your triggers and you know those buttons are actually old wounds. But finding the wound is just the first step. How do you actually heal it? How do you take these concepts of the 90-second rule and the choice point and turn them into automatic, lifelong habits? That requires practice and a clear roadmap. If you're ready to stop being controlled by your past and start living with intention, then you need to commit to transformation. My step-by-step guide, 30 Days to a Better You, gives you the daily exercises and techniques to map your emotional landscape and rewire your reactions in just 1 month. Stop reacting and start choosing your peace. Click the link below to get your copy and start your 30-day journey to emotional freedom today. We've established the 90-second rule, which tells us that the heat of anger is brief, and the trigger map, which shows us that the cause of that heat is usually an old wound. Now, let's dive into the core of emotional intelligence. Understanding what anger is actually hiding. Here is a realization that has the power to fundamentally change how you interact with the world. What you call anger isn't usually anger at all. In emotional science, Anger is often referred to as a secondary emotion. This means it is an emotion that shows up to protect or mask a deeper, more vulnerable feeling. Think of anger as the emotional equivalent of a security guard or a powerful, heavy-duty shield. Anger volunteers to be the spokesperson because it feels strong, powerful, and safe. It's an aggressive outward expression. It pushes people away, which, paradoxically, makes us feel protected. The feelings it's desperately trying to protect, the primary emotions, are things like hurt, fear, shame, sadness, or acute vulnerability. These feelings are messy, soft, and terrifying because they require openness and the risk of being hurt again. Let's look at this dynamic in action. Someone close to you criticizes your work, your parenting, or your appearance, and your immediate reaction is to lash out. You snap back, you get defensive, and you feel that familiar rush of righteous fury. If you stop and ask, what is this anger really hiding? You will find that underneath the fury is almost always hurt. You aren't really angry. You are hurt that they don't see your value. You are hurt that your effort wasn't recognized. You are hurt because a core belief you hold about yourself. I am competent, or I am a good person, was challenged. Anger is just the loud, dramatic voice that volunteers to speak up, because saying, I feel hurt right now, feels like admitting defeat. Consider your partner forgetting an important anniversary. The explosion of rage, the throwing of dishes, the accusations, is not actually about a date on the calendar. Underneath that volcano is a deeper, quieter ache that whispers, do I not matter to you? Am I not important enough for you to remember this? The anger is fear of being insignificant. It's hurt from feeling forgotten. This is the secondary emotion revelation. When you learn to bypass the security guard anger and address the primary emotion underneath, a real transformative shift happens in your relationships and in your emotional health. Why? Because vulnerability heals. Anger only creates distance. Compare these two responses to the same situation. Anger responds secondary emotion. You never remember anything. You're completely selfish and unreliable. Result: a fight, defensiveness, and damaged connection. Vulnerable response primary emotion. When you forgot our anniversary, I felt deeply forgotten and unimportant. It makes me feel like I don't matter to you. Result: a shift in the conversation, empathy, and the chance for a real solution and deeper intimacy. The two statements are communicating the same core issue, but they elicit vastly different reactions. The first is an attack. The second is an invitation for connection. Your superpower in this chapter is to become an emotional detective. The next time you feel that hot surge of anger, pause using the 90-second rule pause, and quickly reflect. If I wasn't allowed to be angry right now, what would I be feeling instead? What is the deeper, more vulnerable feeling that I'm afraid to express? Is this shame? Is it fear? Is it acute sadness? Identifying this hidden emotion is the key to mastering your reactions. When you move from, you made me angry, to, I am feeling insignificant because of X, you take the blame off the other person. Claim the feeling as your own and open the door to a productive conversation. The person who has mastered their emotions isn't the person who never gets angry. It's the person who uses the appearance of anger as a clue. A signal that something vulnerable and important needs attention, protection, and ultimately, healing. Embrace the vulnerability, and you dismantle the need for the shield. We've sailed past the 90-second surge and mapped out the old wounds beneath the surface. Now we arrive at the most crucial discovery in your journey toward emotional mastery, the choice point. Imagine a game of pinball. The initial shot is the trigger. A rude email, a cutting remark, a moment of deep frustration. Your natural wired reaction is the ball immediately bouncing off a bumper and zinging toward a predictable high-score response: defensiveness, rage, or shutting down. Most people live life as a pinball, tossed around by circumstances, helplessly reacting to every external force. But you have a superpower, and it lies in the tiny, invisible sliver of time between the trigger and your ingrained response. Between every stimulus and your reaction, there is a space. In that space lies your power. In that space lies your freedom. This concept isn't just self-help rhetoric. It's a profound truth observed by those who have faced the most extreme duress. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, discovered this fundamental principle in a Nazi concentration camp. He realized that even when stripped of everything, physical comfort, freedom, dignity, the guards could take his possessions and inflict suffering, but they could not take his freedom to choose his response. That is the choice point. When a trigger hits, the 90-second chemical wave starts to wash over you. The mind begins to construct the old destructive story. I must retaliate. This is unfair. I am a victim. But before you speak, before you hit send, before you storm out, there is a microsecond of choice. It is in that microsecond that you go from being the pinball to becoming the player controlling the game. The goal isn't to stop the initial chemical surge. That's biology. The goal is to lengthen that space, to expand that microsecond until you have the mental clarity to choose a response that serves your highest self, instead of defaulting to a reaction that causes damage. How do you activate the superpower? You insert a question. Next time you feel that heat rising, the adrenaline spiking, the face flushing, simply ask yourself one of these questions in the silence of your mind. What response would I be proud of tomorrow? What action will protect my peace, not destroy it? What would the version of me with emotional mastery do right now? This question acts as a mental break. It immediately pulls your brain out of the ancient reactive fight-or-flight center, the amygdala, and into the prefrontal cortex, the sophisticated part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, and long-term thinking. You shift from reacting to considering. Imagine you receive an email from a difficult client that is passive-aggressive and insulting. Your immediate 90-second fueled impulse is to fire back an email that defends your honor and thoroughly demolishes their argument. The choice point technique looks like this. Trigger. Client email is received. Impulse. Hands move to the keyboard, heart races. The pause, the choice point. You physically lean back from the screen and ask, if I send this response, will I be proud of it in the morning? The choice. You realize the proud response is not to retaliate, but to write a calm, professional reply that addresses the core business issue, or to simply walk away from the computer for 5 minutes. That moment of pause, that question, is the difference between escalation and resolution. It is the difference between being pulled into their emotional chaos and standing firmly in your own peace. People you know who never seem to get rattled, who handle crises with an uncanny calmness, they have mastered the space between the trigger and the response. They have trained themselves to access the choice point so quickly and efficiently that it appears instantaneous. You can too. Your past does not dictate your future. You are not a pinball. By consistently using that precious microsecond to choose your response, you become the author of your own emotional experience, creating a life dictated by intention, not impulse. We've covered the power of the 90-second rule, letting the chemicals flush, the wisdom of the trigger map, healing the wound, not fighting the button pusher, and the freedom of the choice point, pausing between stimulus and response. Now, we introduce the final, most sophisticated tool in your emotional arsenal, the observer self. Imagine you are standing on the shore, watching a massive storm roll in. The waves are crashing, the wind is howling, and the sky is dark. You can feel the spray on your face, and the power of the storm is undeniable. But you are standing safely on solid ground, observing the chaos. You are not in the water. You are not the storm. You are the one watching it. The observer self is the part of your consciousness that can watch your emotions, thoughts, and physical sensations without becoming them. Most of us live our lives as our emotions. When we feel angry, we are anger. When we feel anxious, we are anxiety. The emotion takes over the driver's seat, and we feel swept away, lost in the storm. The observer self is the shift from saying, I am angry, to saying, I notice the feeling of anger arising. This is not emotional repression. It is emotional immunity. You are not trying to stop the feeling. That's impossible and unhealthy. You are creating a conscious distance from it, allowing the emotion to be experienced fully, but not letting it hijack your actions or your identity. When you engage the observer self, you begin to narrate your internal experience, not live it blindly. You step back and watch the internal weather patterns, I notice my heart rate increasing. I am having the thought that this person is completely disrespectful. I detect a sudden rush of heat in my chest and face. By using this language, you place yourself in the position of the scientist, calmly analyzing data, rather than the subject being overwhelmed by the experiment. The simple act of labeling the emotion or the thought, for example, I notice irritation rising, uses the logic center of your brain, which automatically dampens the intensity of the emotional center. Think about your teenager rolling their eyes at you, a classic trigger for most parents. The default reaction is immediate defensiveness, a frustrated shout, or a heated lecture. This is your emotional system being hijacked. The observer self technique in this scenario looks like this. Trigger, the eye roll. Internal observation, I notice irritation rising. I notice the thought, they have no respect for me, is forming. The pause. You are watching the rising irritation like a curious spectator without judging it or immediately acting on it. The choice. Because you didn't become the anger, you can now choose a response from a place of calm wisdom, not reflexive impulse. Instead of yelling, you might calmly say, I see that you're frustrated. We can talk about this when you're ready to look at me, but I won't engage with the eye rolling. This is emotional mastery in its purest form. It gives you the power to experience any emotion without being controlled by it. The observer self is the calm, always present part of you that survives every storm. It is the core of your awareness that is never rattled, never swayed, and never defined by external events. When you learn to consistently operate from this vantage point, you gain emotional immunity. You can navigate conflict, criticism, and chaos with a quiet steadiness that others mistake for being cold, but which is actually the deepest form of inner peace. Every time you pause and say, I notice X emotion, you are building a stronger muscle for the observer self. This practice ensures that your emotional state remains your inner sanctuary, impervious to the whims and actions of the people around you. You get to feel everything, but you are controlled by nothing.